Our main character, Woon Ji-woo, dedicated some time to exercising in her room while enjoying music. During her journey to school, a police officer approached her to inquire about her father, who was involved in criminal activities related to drugs. Ever since her father's case was exposed, Ji-woo experienced isolation from her classmates who defaced her desk with hurtful messages. Later, she was summoned to the principal's office, where she was informed that she would be expelled from school. The principal clarified that many parents had expressed concerns about having a student with a parent involved in criminal activities and drug dealing attending the same school as their own children. Upon returning to her classroom, Ji-woo discovered a heap of garbage on her desk. Due to frustration, she lashed out at her classmates, resulting in a physical altercation. Later, she handed her ID to one of her teachers and rushed out of the school in anger. Upon reaching her home, Ji-woo noticed a police car still waiting for her, prompting her to attack the vehicle. This action led to a police pursuit, during which Ji-woo fled near the beach in an attempt to evade capture. She took a seat, remembering the moments she had shared with her father. Throughout her childhood, she had been cared for with love by her father, so she still couldn't believe that he was involved in criminal activities. When Ji-woo returned home later that evening, saw police stationed in front of her residence, the same police who had been pursuing her earlier. She continued inside and ignored them. Meanwhile, her father Yun Dong-hoon attempted to reach her through a payphone. Initially, she ignored the call, but eventually, she answered. Her father inquired about her well-being and extended birthday wishes. However, Ji-woo expressed her frustration with her current circumstances and placed blame on her father for the hardships in her life. In response, her father assured her that he would resolve his problems soon. Nevertheless, Ji-woo had already reached a point of disappointment and had lost faith in waiting for her father, believing him to be no longer alive. In his car, Ji-woo's father powered on his long-neglected cell phone. He was greeted by a message from Ji-woo, expressing her dissatisfaction with her miserable life. Without hesitation, her father resolved to head home to be with her. Upon reaching his house, he confronted the police guard stationed outside. Rendering them unconscious, he then quickly entered the house. As he attempted to unlock the door, Ji-woo was awakened by the noise from the door. Quickly, she moved toward the door to investigate the disturbance. Peeking through a hole in the door, Ji-woo spotted her father wounded. On the other side, a mysterious man making his way toward the exit. Upon seeing this, she attempted to open the door. However, her father was concerned for her safety and seemed to be blocking it to prevent her from exiting. Thereafter, her father offered his apologies to Ji-woo for the misery he had brought into her life. Shortly before his passing, she attempted to open the door and was met with the sight of her father lying lifeless and drenched in blood. She embraced her father's lifeless form as she burst into tears. The following day, a group of men in black suits, led by Choi Moo-jin, arrived at the funeral home. They were rumored to be the most active gangsters in the city. Moo-jin, who had been her father's closest friend, came to bid his final farewell. Ji-woo inquired about her father's murder. Before their departure, she received only the brief response that her father had been the person he trusted above all others. As she gazed upon her father's body one last time before his cremation, memories of happier moments lingered in her mind. She couldn't understand why her father had suddenly chosen to pursue such a dangerous job. Afterward, Ji-woo made a visit to the police station to inquire about the progress of her father's murder case. The investigator told her that the case of her father's murder was closed because there were no witnesses or evidence. Hearing this, she got angry and showed the CCTV camera footage at the crime scene, but the police officer scolded her and blamed her father for being a fugitive criminal. That night, Moo-jin's men reported to him that Ji-woo had come to see him. Hearing this, he let her in. While inside his headquarters, she saw people busy counting money and packing drugs after entering the room. She showed Moo-jin's CCTV camera footage, requesting him to find her father's killer as she planned to kill that person with her own hands. Moo-jin stood up and handed Ji-woo a knife, telling her to stab him, but she didn't dare to hurt or kill him. Therefore, Mugen said he didn't want to help her and instead kicked her out. Arriving back at her house, she heard a knock at her door. Peeking through a small hole, she spotted a man in a black coat, a familiar sight from the night of her father's murder. Filled with fear, she initially hid under a blanket, waiting for the suspicious man to depart. However, her determination eventually drove her to pursue the figure, intent on avenging her father. Armed with a golf club, she tried to chase the man, but to her dismay, he had disappeared. She refused to give up and took the initiative by posting a brochure featuring CCTV images on the wall. The poster offered a reward of 5 million for any information regarding the person in the pictures. Meanwhile, Mugen saw the poster on a wall and decided to take action. Later, Jiwoo received a call from an unknown caller, who said he had information concerning her father's murderers. Upon hearing this, she armed herself with a penknife and arranged to meet this mysterious informant. Upon reaching the designated meeting place, she discovered that the caller was nothing more than a local thug and his gang, intent on robbing her. They attack her and place her in the car's trunk. While inside the trunk, she heard the sound of a vehicle coming to a halt. Jiwoo, driven by desperation, attempted to force open the trunk. To her surprise, the person who had halted the car turned out to be Mugen, and his men had already beaten the thugs. Mugen told Jiwoo to forget her quest for vengeance and resume her life. However, burdened by a sense of guilt for her late father, she declined his request. She was determined not to let the police close her father's murder case without a proper resolution. Witnessing her unwavering determination, Mugen offered a stark piece of advice. If she truly sought revenge, she needed to first learn how to kill people. The following day, Mugen escorted Jiwoo to a coastal training facility used by his organization. He explained that all his recruits underwent training there before joining his ranks. Mugen then issued orders to his men, who were taken aback as it was the first time they had a female trainee. The next day, one of Mugen's top men, Jun Taiju, expressed his disagreement with Mugen's decision to admit Jiwoo into their organization. However, Mugen insisted on allowing her to seek vengeance for her father. In the training area, Jiwoo was assigned to a room by a man named Ganji, who instructed her to handle cleaning duties initially. He promised a transfer to another place if her skills proved worthy. Meanwhile, some of Mugen's men treated Jiwoo harshly, leading to a fight that was stopped by other members. Since she had no desire to turn back, Jiwoo dedicated herself to solitary training every night. Shortly after Mugen visited her, he asked about her determination to pursue her goals, to which she replied that she would do her best to become stronger. Upon hearing this, Mugen proceeded to teach her survival techniques and initiated her in various combat methods, keeping a close watch on her progress nearly every day. The time arrived to determine the toughest gang member, with the winner earning the opportunity to work alongside Mugen. In the ultimate test, participants had to survive their opponent's attacks until only one person would become the winner. While the battle raged on, Gongji seemed to hold his ground, but in the end, Jiwoo exhibited remarkable will and determination. Jiwoo became the winner. After being beaten by Jiwoo, Ganji eventually regained consciousness. Seeing his friend, who had witnessed a replay of his earlier fight, and now laughing at him. Due to the embarrassment of losing to Jiwoo, Gongji plans retaliation against her. On a separate note, Jiwoo's drink had been drugged by one of Gongji's men, causing her to feel dizzy shortly afterward. One of Gongji's friends attempted to intervene and prevent Gongji and his men from carrying out their intentions towards Jiwoo. Fortunately, Jiwoo retained some consciousness and confronted them as they approached her room. In response to the commotion, Taiju arrived at Jiwoo's room to intervene and halt their actions. Upon learning of Ganji's intentions to harm Jiwoo, Mugen expressed his disappointment in Ganji taking his sword and aiming it at Ganji. Faced with this threat, Ganji offered an apology and knelt in submission. However, Mugen had already disappointed in him. Subsequently, Mugen approached him and struck the tip of his sword against Ganji's face. In her room, Jiwoo cried as she gathered the remains of her father's shattered body. Later, Taiju arrived at the training grounds, where he placed blame on her for defeating Gangji. Taiju suggested that she and her father didn't belong in the criminal underworld and urged her to step away from it. Despite his advice, she refused to follow. Then, Jiwoo was escorted to a tavern to meet with Mujin, who shared that it was her father's favorite place. In addition to this, he gave her a new identity. She would be known as Hyjin, as the name Jiwoo had been associated with her mother, who had fallen victim to the gang. Mujin also handed her the firearm she had discovered upon her father's demise and disclosed that a police officer was responsible for her father's murder. As a result, he arranged for her admission into the police academy as Hyjin, with the mission of uncovering her father's killer. Over time, Hyjin continuously honed her skills, becoming expert in the use of various weapons, ultimately preparing herself for retribution. She even had the organization's tattoo etched onto her chest, signifying her official induction into the Mujin criminal network, binding her to secrecy and loyalty. 3 years later, Hyjin successfully entered the police academy and became a member of the crime unit. On that particular day, she had an assignment to track down a long-time fugitive murder suspect. She instructed her friend to call for backup before entering a nightclub where the suspect was believed to be inside. She discovered the suspect engaged in a drug transaction with a male dealer. Meanwhile, Hyjin conducted room checks, and one by one, she came across women who were suffering from drug overdoses, offering assistance where she could. Subsequently, she encountered a room where several men engaged in illicit drug transactions. Without hesitation, she entered, resulting in a confrontation that escalated into a brawl. Shortly, the police arrived, and Hyjin was handcuffing the suspect. Later, a man named Pildu gets disappointed in her, believing she has foiled plans he had meticulously crafted for 6 months. As it turned out, he was an undercover police officer from the drug unit assigned to apprehend the same suspect. A heated dispute ensued between them over custody of the suspect. Eventually, the captain summoned Hyjin and granted custody of the suspect to Pildu. Pildu told Hyjin that he never wanted to see her again. A gang fight erupted while Mujin was walking calmly in the chaos. It became apparent that he was in pursuit of a former associate who had betrayed their organization by selling drugs to others. The man begged Mujin for clemency, but Mujin ruthlessly executed him. The following day, Hyjin observed making her way to the police headquarters. She planned to volunteer for a transfer to the drug unit and had an encounter with the unit's leader, Captain Cha. Upon seeing his face, Hyjin was reminded of her father's murderer. After Captain Cha reviewed her profile and assessed her skills, he approved her request to join his team, and she was slated to begin her new assignment the following week. Later that evening, Hyjin visited Mujin to share the news of her acceptance into the drug unit. During their conversation, she disclosed her suspicions regarding Captain Cha, who had once visited her home wearing the same jacket as her father's killer. Afterward, Mujin recounted the story of when Hyjin's father initially saved him. During that incident, a gang fight erupted, pushing Mujin's gang to the brink. While his own men had abandoned him, Hyjin's father had chosen to stand by his side. This moment had been captured in a photograph, which Mujin now displayed on his desk. He handed Hyjin her father's knife and instructed her to use it to avenge her father's killer. Meanwhile, at the police station, a man named Chong Ho was undergoing interrogation. When asked to name his accomplices and his boss, he redirected the conversation to discuss an individual named Mango, who had developed a new type of drug in the form of candy. Later, on his way back to his quarters, Pildu coincidentally encountered Hyjin, who was heading to the drug unit. She informed him about her decision to join the drug unit, prompting him to voice his objections to Captain Cha. He argued that having a woman on their team would be burdensome. However, Captain Cha attempted to reassure him by suggesting that Hyjin might not last more than a month. Upon hearing this, Pildu accepted Hyjin's presence in the drug unit. After that, Captain Cha was conducting an investigation into a case involving a man who had tragically ended his life inside a car. The evidence pointed to Moojin as the perpetrator, as he had used poison gas. Yet, he had orchestrated the scene to make it appear as if the man had taken his own life. In another location, Taiju has a conversation with Woon Moojin regarding his lingering doubts about Hyejin's loyalty. However, Moojin expresses his trust in Hyejin's judgment and reveals his intention to seek revenge. He also sees her potential as a valuable asset within their organization. Meanwhile, the team has initiated a mission to locate a drug dealer named Mango. Pildu instructs Hyejin to carry out the mission herself. Hyejin proceeds to the designated location. However, when she presents her ID card, she is suddenly attacked by a man, resulting in a brawl. It becomes apparent that Pildu intentionally sent Hyejin in as bait to apprehend Mango when he attempted to escape. Pildu remains hidden until they go in to check on Hyejin. Upon arriving at the scene, Pildu is astonished to find the gangsters lying unconscious on the floor. He then enters the room and discovers Hyejin apprehending a man named Mango single-handedly. Pildu is taken aback, as he had not expected Hyejin to successfully capture Mango and incapacitate his henchmen on her own. Following Mango's apprehension, he inquires about the arrest warrant, to which Pildu responds with a laugh. The group hurried to search for the drugs within the premises and they came up empty-handed. Hyejin begins to suspect the nervous bartender, leading her to investigate a wine bottle behind the bar, where she discovers drugs hidden inside. Eventually, Mango is arrested on drug-related charges. On their way home, Pildu appears deeply concerned for Hyejin's safety. He scolds her for not wearing a safety vest, fearing that someone might harm her. At the office, Mango faced a thorough interrogation. He clarified that the drug is new to the market, and it was crafted by a man named Gong Ji. 5 years ago, Gong Ji had nearly taken Jiwoo's life. But he was eventually penalized by Moojin, who marked his face with a sword. Following this encounter, Gong Ji parted ways with Moojin's group and began manufacturing an undetectable drug, sparking significant interest among potential buyers. Hyejin, aware of this secret, discreetly informed Moojin that very night. Subsequently, Hyejin gained unauthorized access to the police database, seizing the opportunity to gather evidence related to her father's murder. But, the assailant responsible for her father's death had been donning a full-face helmet, making it a challenging investigation. She learned that Captain Cha had been assigned to apprehend a drug dealer on the day her father was killed, but she remained uncertain about whether it was her father involved. Meanwhile, Moojin instructed Taiju to dig into the identity of the manufacturer behind this innovative drug. Eugene and his secretary, Katsuhira, engaged in negotiations with the Yakuza, who were set to purchase the drugs the following day. Hyejin and all team members were swiftly deployed on a mission to apprehend a drug dealer who had been on the run for over a decade before going off the grid. To maintain operational security, all their cell phones were collected, ensuring there were no leaks during the mission. Shortly after their target was revealed, Hyejin learned that it was Choi Moojin, the notorious drug dealer who controlled a staggering 90% of the distribution network in South Korea. Being aware of this, Hyejin felt confused and unsure of how to proceed. Meanwhile, they had to transfer their secret lab onto a ship. The police carefully planned this operation to ensure Moojin had no opportunity to escape. Captain Cha oversaw the mission from the ship via a camera and Pil had brought along for strategic purposes. When all preparations were in place, they initiated the operation. Hyejin wanted to secretly alert Moojin about their arrival, but she found herself powerless as Pil watched her every move. Suddenly, an unknown assailant launched an attack on the Pil. However, he managed to fend off the assailant. Meanwhile, Pil, now aware of Moojin's location, descended to the laboratory level and forced him into surrendering. But then, an unexpected power outage occurred, accompanied by a massive fire on the ship, leading to the failure of their mission. Unfortunately, they were unable to record any footage of their time in the lab or their encounter with Moojin. Suddenly, Hai Jin shouted out and told them she found a gun from the shooter. In reality, it was the very gun used by her father's killer, which she had been holding onto. She was curious to witness Captain Cha's reaction upon seeing the weapon.